everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Eagle Insights podcast.
This is a podcast where we dive deeper into our school community and highlight the stories, ideas, and people making a difference around us.
We're so excited to have a very special guest with us, one of the middle school English teachers here at Dunecrest.
She joined our school in the 2022 to 2023 school year. She's been involved in so many parts of our school community, from coaching sports teams and helping with the World Scholars and NHS to running the Wellness Club and supporting students with mindfulness and mental health.
Dedication to helping students grow, both academically and personally, truly makes a difference every day. We're so excited to learn more about her experiences and what inspires her, and the impact she's had on our school.
We're
Thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast. I'm super excited to talk to you both.
Thank you, Miss, for
We
coming.
have already given a brief introduction, but we'd love to hear from you. Could you introduce yourself a bit and tell us a bit about how your role and what you're involved in around the school?
Sure. So I'm Ms.Z, and like you said, I teach middle school English. So all three grades, sixth, seventh, and eighth. As you know, I had you both all 3 years. But Um, in addition to teaching, I'm also a coach. So I coach JV girls volleyball and girls football, middle school girls football. Um, and I am also the advisor for the Student Wellbeing Committee for high school. I do help with National Honor Society when I can. And my first 2 years, I was helping with World Scholars Cup. So I am involved as much as I can be with clubs and sports and obviously teaching as well.
That's amazing, Miss. Through your work with the Wellness Club, why do you think mindfulness and mental health are especially important for students today?
That's a great question. Well, as you know, students today are growing up much differently than I did. So I mean, obviously taking care of your mental health is always important, but now more than ever, with the amount of access that kids have to information with social media and just the internet in general, I think it becomes really easy to become consumed with information, and a lot of times kids can get lost in that digital world. So I think it's important that everyone take some time to really ground themselves and be more mindful of reality, especially teenagers who are already vulnerable and going through, a difficult time. So I think, instead of comparing ourselves to what other people have or feeling like we're missing out through social media posts and things like that, we really need to take care of ourselves and our mental health and just take some time to really focus on the reality of our situation.
That is such an important message. You've been involved in so many different areas at the school. What motivates you to take on so much, and what do you enjoy most about it?
Well, I've always been a hard worker. I started working when I was 16 in the US, and even then, I always had multiple jobs. So, I like staying busy. But as far as the school environment goes, I think for me, it's really fulfilling to see kids in, different environments. I see them primarily in the classroom environment, but I often feel inspired when I see kids trying something new, working through the challenges of maybe learning a sport or, developing some sort of talent in art or theater, or whatever it is. And I just like to be a part of that. I think it's, really important to be supportive of my students in their exploration of interests. And I find that those are the moments that I just feel happiest. So I like to, you know, get to know the students in other ways. And also that helps me in the classroom because obviously when you know your students and what they're interested in and how they learn, you're able to be a better teacher too.
Miss, you were just talking about how taking on so much helped you connect with the students. but is there something else you've learned or experienced that have changed the way you approach teaching?
Let me think. So I think for me, I have always tried to have a lot of control of my classroom. You know, I'm a planner, so I like to have things in order. I'm very organized, and it was kind of difficult for me to not teach according to my plan. But the thing about Dunecrest is that it's a relatively small school. So, as a teacher, I'm fortunate that I have the same students multiple years, and it's just a close-knit community. So with that, I feel like I've been able to kind of give up some of that control that I normally have in the classroom, and it has allowed me to just be more flexible and, listen to my students. Um, I'm sure you both can name a time in the past where I had something planned and then the class was like, Miss, we don't really feel like doing it this way. Can we do it this way instead? And normally I would have been like, no, this is how we're doing it because I had a vision or I just thought I knew best. But really, you as students, you know better a lot of times. You know how you learn, you know what you're capable of, and you have different tools and resources that, maybe I don't always know of. So I think my time at Dunecrest has taught me that I don't need to have so much control of my classroom and that I can leave some of that, planning and input to my students because, you're able to have a say.
That is such a good observation and realization. Out of everything that you've been involved in, is there one experience that stands out to you the most?
Well, I have so many, everyday moments that are special and memorable. But one of my favorite moments is from the first year that we held Sports Fest. So, Sports Fest is an ESOL sports competition, and it's football, basketball, volleyball, and badminton. And the first year that we had it, we hosted it at Dunecrest. And for the girls' team, which I was coaching, we didn't have a goalkeeper for football. And one of the girls obviously decided to take on the challenge, and she ended up being really good. And I mean, she was terrified, obviously, as anyone would be if you've never played that position before. But I think for me, what made it so special was that all of the girls on the team were just so supportive and so motivating. And, they really cheered her on and made sure that she felt supported. And I think that that moment is so memorable because it's just one snapshot of how my experience at Dunecrest has been. I feel like the students at Dunecrest are really close and are super supportive of each other. Like you guys have each other's backs, and that's not always the case in all schools. So for me, that's just one of those moments that really stands out. And actually, that girl, she still plays goalkeeper and she's become really good at it. And she even played JV this year, even as a middle schooler. So I think that was probably one of my most memorable moments. But there are so many things that happen just in day-to-day teaching that are special, but that's maybe one of the bigger ones.
That's great, Miss. As a middle school English teacher, what do you hope your students take away from your class beyond just the academics and the work?
That's a great question. Um, I think obviously I want my students to become critical thinkers. Um, I want my students to look at problems that they face and realize that there are multiple ways of solving those problems. Um, and I think the most important thing is that I want my students to realize that they have power. So just because you're only 12 years old, it doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to make a change in the world. It might not be, on the world's biggest stage yet, but you do have the power to make a small change, whether it's through, you know, being kind to someone who seems lonely or upset, or, um, being generous with something that you have that someone else doesn't have. Like those are small acts, but they do make a big difference in the world. And I try to incorporate stories and, research projects into my classes that are inspiring because I think, I love Dubai and I love the UAE, but it's such a safe place and it almost becomes, a bubble. And I think it's important that we remember that there's a great big world outside of the UAE. And, people in the world don't always have it as good as we do. And unless we are exposed to how other people live, we wouldn't know. So I try to incorporate stories into my classes that kind of give that exposure. So again, going back to my original point that I want my students to recognize that they have the power to make a change. I want them to be able to know that moving forward, once they leave school, they can make a bigger difference in the world, if that makes sense.
It makes so much sense. Them realizing that could change a lot about how they think of the world. What is one thing that makes Dunecrest unique or different from other schools you've taught at?
Well, one thing that makes it unique is how we have just separated the school. So in most schools, even if they are a K through 12 school, they don't always mix like middle school with high school. So for me, what makes Dunecrest special is that we're separated by department. So, I am in a pod with the English department. So it's special for me because I can still see my former students and keep up with them, check on them. I have students who are in, or former students, I should say, who are in grade 11 now, who I had when they were in grade 8, and they still come to see me, a couple times a week. And it's so nice to be able to catch up. And I think, especially when I have students for so many years, like we do develop a close relationship, and it's important for me to, check in to make sure that they're still doing okay. I love to hear about how their English classes are going and, what they're reading and things like that. So for me, just having access to my former students, that's something that's really unique because all of the schools I've worked at in the past have been so separated. So once the students leave middle school, I hardly ever see them. It's a little bit more difficult for them to touch base with me. So I really like that because it just allows me to maintain that relationship that I have with them. And, I still get to see everyone, and that's important.
Gratitude is a huge value in our school community. And in our daily lives, we often do take things for granted and don't always pause to appreciate them. What are three things you're grateful for
Three things that I'm grateful for. Do you mean at school or just in
in
general?
general in life?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm grateful for the people that I have in my life, my family, who has always supported me in all of my adventures, and my friends. I've had the same friends since I was your age, and I'm very grateful for my friendships. But I'm also grateful for the opportunities that I have. Um, not everyone has the chance to leave their home country and take a job on the other side of the world. And I don't ever take that for granted. I think I'm very lucky to be able to teach internationally and to get to know students from all over the world. And have such a unique experience. So that's number two. And then I think just everyday um, luxuries like, having warm water and being able to drive a car, things that make my day-to-day life easier. And those are things that maybe we don't really think about often, but they are really important. So those would be my three.
Those are three really important things. And that brings our podcast and interview to an end. Thank you so much, Ms.Z, for joining us today and sharing your story and journey here at Dunecrest.
And thank you to everyone listening into the Eagles Insights podcast.
Explore above the surface to bring you deeper insights and take a closer look at the stories around us.
And highlight the people behind our community, just like Ms.Z. See you next time.
See you next time.